Hello, everyone, and welcome to our win loss webinar. We got a good one today. We're talking about moving from reactionary to strategic, leveraging win loss specifically for sales. We have two awesome guests with us here today. Um, for context, my name is Scott Knudson. I head the sales enablement here at Clozd. To my right is another Scott, Scott Varner. He's one of our consultants here, one of our expert senior consultants here. And the honorary guest is Deanna, who is the head of product at Acquia. Welcome, both of you. Hello, hello.
Hello. Can't see the
Yeah.
double Scott situation ever be confusing once today.
Scott and Scott, thank you for letting me join in, even though my name's Deanna.
Did I say, what did I say?
No, you didn't. I was just stating the
Oh,
fact that I get to join the party.
I was like, did I say it wrong? Oh, no.
No, you didn't. It
We're
was
off to a
right.
rocky start. Yeah, even though your name is not Scott, it's still going to be a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, we are going to hop right into it because, for all the product marketers, the PMMs, the sales leaders, anybody tuning in, we want to jump straight to the content here. And I like to give just a little bit of context about what win-loss is. Sometimes this is the first foray into that for those kind of tuning in. So for those who don't know, win-loss analysis is a way in which you understand why you're winning and losing deals, typically by surveying or interviewing your buyers. So typically at a company like Clozd, we would reach out to your pipeline and talk to those people who bought, or in some cases didn't buy you, maybe went with your competitor, and we use a consultant like Scott to interview them and get to kind of those root issues, figure out the decision drivers that led to that decision, and then source it back to people like Deanna so that they can make business decisions, right? And change their product, update their marketing, adjust their sales strategy and all sorts of things. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today. Did I do a
Yeah,
good job?
I think it's great. Just as long as we all keep in mind, like our goal of why we're doing this, we're directly impacting our win rate. We're winning more deals. This is an org wide effort. Hence why we need to figure out how we can be strategic and not reactionary.
100%. And even though we obviously are a win-loss provider, we encourage you all to start your own win-loss programs. If you're doing it internally or using a third party like us, great. This is all good insights for you.
Yeah. Deanna, I know we brought you in because if we actually think about practitioners that have been doing win loss on the front lines in an organization, you're probably at the forefront. You're probably one of the people that has been doing win loss longer than I would say most people and have done a really great job of driving results.
Yeah. I mean, to Scott's point, just get started. Like that is how I started in 2015. I would say, to your explanation of a win-loss interview and analysis, it is a key piece of a product manager's toolkit. And so when I started product management, that is what we needed to do. How do we get to our buyers and our evaluators? And win-loss analysis is a key piece of that. So to all of the product managers or the product marketers out there, I would encourage that same advice and just get started, whether you're using Clozd or yourself.
Yeah. And I kind of want to start there actually and talk about that process because there was a certain point where you weren't doing win-loss analysis, and then something happened. In your mind, you're like, we need to start doing this. Can you speak to a little bit about the journey there of what kind of led you to being motivated to start a program? And we'll kind of we'll flow through that timeline up until now. But what was the beginning stages like?
Yeah. So over the course of my career, I've been leading software product organizations. So as a leader, especially as a developer leader and a project leader and things of that nature, sales would typically bring me in to say, "Hey, we're losing this deal. How might you come in and you could be the closer? How can you help us win this deal?" And in 2015, I actually embarked on formal product management training. And that is when I learned about the wonderness of win loss and the ability to use it to really understand the market and why you're losing. Like, that's always been a thing. Why are we losing this deal?
Yeah.
So at that point, when sales tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" I changed the conversation. Instead of, yes, I did go in like I always did with sales to support them in that deal. But then I decided to change the conversation and start an informal interview process with our sales by doing the interviews myself. So in that case, I went to our sales team and I said, "Hey, now when we have a deal that we have lost and you'd like more information, here's this great new format called a win-loss interview. I'm willing to do it. Tap me on the shoulder," and I would do that. So it just started off as easy as that as far as getting started.
Love
Um,
that.
I
The
will
the
say it was very ad hoc. It was very ad hoc to start though.
which I'm sure it is for most. Scott, you obviously you work with lots of clients,
Yeah,
including Acquia. Does that kind of ring true as far as how people start to get into Winlock? Like, what does that typically look like from your lens?
totally. I think people usually we're in an era of customer centricity. A lot of orgs, I think, want two things. They want to stay really focused on their customer, and every org also wants to win more. So I think people sometimes they accidentally end up in win loss because they're trying to combine those efforts. And they realize we can do two birds with one stone. The reason why they're doing it might be a little bit different depending on if we're an early emerging company. We're trying to gain ground fast, or we're trying to defend the ground that we have if we're a big one. We need to validate our product, or we need to solve like a sales trading problem. Sometimes it's just a validation effort.
Yeah. Yeah, something I see a lot is, especially people coming to Clozd, is they often end up being in kind of one of two camps. Either they're kind of before Deanna, where they're like, we have no idea why we win and lose at all. Can you help us with this? We don't have the bandwidth or the means. Or they've kind of got to Deanna's point and they're like, okay, we have some hypothesis and we're doing a little bit of this ourselves, but we're not sure how much we can trust it. So maybe we can, rely on an expert
Yeah.
or rely on another provider to really, really help us understand, like, are we actually winning this way? Like, this is kind of what we're hearing, but is it true?
Yeah.
Can you guys go talk to our customers? Because like, we're not necessarily getting the full story, right? Now, Deanna, you mentioned kind of sales tapped you a little bit to, hey, why are we winning and losing, right? In our experience, sometimes there's maybe a little bit of friction with sales. Do you feel like at first when you're kind of starting that program, did you run into any of that friction and did you have any issues getting sales kind of completely on board?
Yeah. I mean, we can never imagine friction between sales and product, could we?
Sellers are they never have
Sure.
friction with anyone.
Yes, the products always have every feature that we need to close a deal. So yes, there was obviously some friction there. I would say too, the initial program, many of our sales team, they didn't find it like, hey, you're looking to help us. And so they started tapping on our shoulder really for those hard losses. So once we said, hey, we can interview for this and support you, when they had hard losses, they tapped our shoulder to do that. But it was really emotionally driven at that point. They wanted
Yeah.
to be involved and sit in on them. They wanted to actually use that information to try to revigorate the deal and to bring it back. So it was being done in maybe a very reactionary state at that moment. So that was, the first foray into it. And then once we were able to transition though away from sales, tapping on our shoulder, we went with, we were matured into the Clozd platform in about 2019. That is when we also got to take another stab at changing the conversation. So using the tool and the process that is provided with Clozd, instead of waiting for sales to tap us, we actually just went through our CRM and we harvested the opportunities ourselves. So we no longer were, I guess, we didn't need sales to give us those customer contacts. We were able to just go and get them ourselves. And what we were able to do then was to just use the platform and the tool to show our sales and buyers the power of these interviews. And that really changed, I guess, the whole conversation with sales and how they saw our win-loss interviews. It was no longer a guess as to why we're losing a deal. And it was also no longer a guess to why we're winning deals. I would also say that.
Yeah.
It also gave our sales team great confidence in some of the areas that we are winning and to be able to focus on that area instead of always necessarily focusing on the features or the things that we don't do well yet and why we're losing. So it really, I guess, having the transparency of those full transcripts and close just revolutionized the way that we as a product team were able to engage with sales on the roadmap and how we were prioritizing work.
Yeah. Interested too. Like initially, sales you said was tapping you on the shoulder to say, go look at these deals for kind of like an emotional component, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, when you made that transition, how did you also transition how you were like coming up with the right deals to interview? And how did sales react when you were going in that new approach?
Yeah. So what we ended up doing, and we still do to this day, is we look at our initiatives in like 6 month sections, and we say, what are we trying to change here? Whether that's pricing and packaging, or a new user base or a new product market fit. And then we let sales know that, and we ask for a certain amount of opportunities that we're going to go after. So it might be mid-market deals or enterprise deals or EMEA deals, right? We're trying to get a sense for the market. And by just telling them what we were after, they became more supportive in helping us and making sure that we have the right contacts from the CRM. So it's really just opening up the line of communications and letting them know, like, this is what we're trying to get to, and this is why we're trying to get there. And oh, by the way, you're going to have full access to all of it. It's not going to be hidden. You don't have to
Yeah.
wait for us to give it back to you. That the notification that every salesperson is signed into, so when you publish an interview, they get to see it, has been amazing because then they can access it on their own time and it's not hidden with any barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And just to kind of recap that a little bit, because I think this is a situation we hear about people kind of getting stuck a little bit is they're kind of starting to build this program and they want to get sales bought in, but yes, sometimes the only time that sales is reaching out is on these emotional deals, these big losses, the competitive deals. Why did we lose this? Can someone go figure it out? Right. But they're like, but don't touch the rest of our pipeline. Like we're good at everything else. Right. Uh, maybe there's this fear of it, maybe feeling like a witch hunt, or yeah, there's the communication lines feel closed, and so they don't know why you're reaching out, right? And I love how you said that of what you're trying to do is open up that line, be like, this is what we want to do, and ultimately this is for your benefit, right? We want to figure this out so you can sell more. This isn't to like lampoon and be like, look at this bad sales rep, like you got to get them out of here, right? Uh, if anything, and this is, coming from being in enablement and being in sales for a long time, there is a little bit of pride in your deals, right? And you feel like, no, I worked really hard on that. Like, I don't know, there's sometimes you don't want to taste that bitter drink a little bit of like, could maybe I've been part of the problem, you know? And if you are, great. It's better to know that it's a coaching issue, that your sales floor needs training. And it's not, oh, it's a product issue or oh, it's a pricing issue. And so we have to lower our prices and cut into our margins. When that may not be the issue at all, right? So I think that's great of hey, open the lines, helping sales reps and sales leadership understand like we're doing this for you. And by the way, yeah, you get all this data. Like this is coming right back directly to you. So you can see it and make those necessary changes. I love that.
Yeah. I would say that the decision drivers that we've set up with Clozd, sales is one of, I think, 10. So yes, we are going to be able to get information back on how sales has done, how that specific, salesperson may or may not have impacted the deal. But because it's one of 10, again, it changes that conversation. It's just one
Yeah.
of 10 decision drivers, rather the only decision driver. And so it,
Okay.
it, it really eliminates that fear once you start to see the interview and the overall analysis.
Yeah, Scott, do you see with all the clients you work with, what kind of insights are some of your other clients seeing, like
Yeah.
leveraging
Well, I
this?
think I think adding context to what Deanna just said of like what we're looking for and you use the term decision drivers, we're really looking for like what drove the buyer's decision making process. Those are our decision drivers. And we are doing this full 360 sweep of deals. You talked about like why people may initially be hesitant to let somebody go talk to their deals and win losses. It's not always that they're afraid of like facing the facts that maybe they had part of the problem. Sometimes it's, I actually think I have full understanding of what exactly happened in this deal. Um, and there's where there's a little bit of humility where you might have to say, maybe actually I don't know everything, or also maybe the customer was not telling me all the details that they would tell someone else. And so I think that's the number one like first answer to your question
Yeah.
is when people really recognize we're going to be driving a conversation that goes much bigger than the window that you had. We might be able to find out factors that started before the deal, relationships they already had that impacted you during the process. We might find out the moves that your competitors were making during the deal process as you were navigating this whole process. So people tend to just come back and see, oh, yeah, like I actually was only thinking about one kind of lens to go back to what you said, Deanna. I was only looking at just this one thing of my demo with them or the way they
Mhm.
reacted to my pricing. There was a lot more happening behind the scenes.
Yes. And I would add on to that having a third party, because we were doing these ourselves. Many times when we interviewed the buyers ourselves. They actually wanted to tell us all the nice things about us, right? That people
Yes.
don't want to
You were
confide in you the
great.
problems, right? They don't do that. However, the candidness that we get from a third party has really allowed us to look at the information and what's back in and that, just pull it apart and pick it apart without our own emotion tied to it as well. So I think to your point, Scott, like having a third party handle these interviews also eliminates that desire to want to, please somebody or make sure you're not uh, ruining any relationships you might want in the future.
Yeah. Well, also, I think the word witch hunt we used before that sometimes people say, oh, maybe product is just coming in or marketing is just coming in so they can tell us what we're doing wrong. And what we're really doing is, no, we want to tell you what you're doing right so you can double down on that. And we want to help make refinements. I think one of the big success stories that I had is, one time we had this client that we found out people loved them. They loved their reps, they loved their product. They were always getting right there to the end to the red zone and not quite finishing the deal. And what we learned is, oh, it's actually just the competitors are tailoring their demos a little bit better. And so we figured out, well, when people say they tailored the demo better, what does that mean? And we could take that feedback straight from the customer in. And in 6 months, no longer were we hearing that demos was why we were losing the deals. We were hearing, whoa, demos is why we're winning the deals, where it's they love our reps and we're tailoring to their organization.
Love that. Yeah. When you talk about third party, the example I often give is normally when you eat at a restaurant that maybe you don't have the best experience, the chicken's dry, it was slow. It's pretty rare that you like go back to the back room and talk to the chef or reach
Mm.
out to the restaurant owner. But you're really inclined to go on Yelp or Google reviews and be like, the service was bad. Be warned, right? There's something about not talking to that first party that, yeah, you're a little able to express a little more candor. Obviously, that's one of our pitches as closed. But even again, it's important to just go out and start having these conversations and not be afraid of like, well, maybe someone might get scared or yeah, they might be. Yeah, I think your approach is awesome, which is go out, get the pipeline, start the process. And then yeah, obviously we think it'd be great if you leverage the third party. There's benefits to that. I want to talk about so we talked about starting the program. Really the step two of it, or the second phase really is kind of maturing it. Talk to me about that of, you two have worked together. How did your program that you start mature? And you kind of alluded to it a little bit every kind of 6 months. What does that look like at Acquia?
Yeah, so it has really matured just the expanse that it has over the organization. I will say that the guidance that we've had working with Scott on how we should focus, I mean, a lot of back and forth collaboration. Here are our initiatives. Here's what we're thinking about. And, Scott, your ability to help steer us there has really helped us shape those 6 month programs. Even, through this process in 2021, Acquia acquired Widen, and I was part of Widen. So one of the key pieces of our win-loss analysis over the course of the next 6 to 9 months was let's hear how that has impacted our brand perception. Let's understand what the market thinks. Like we were able to take clear concerns that we had as a leadership team and then put that into our interview guides. And then with the ability, like we said, those notifications, all of the executive leadership is signed up to get these interviews and get their support. So now that we have the program and they understand the strategic ties to it, all of the leadership team are now making use of the same data that we're getting from win-loss analysis, not just for sales, not just for product, for our roadmap, but also for CSMs, for service, support. Our engineer manager is bringing this information into their technology roadmap discussions on how to prioritize things, our churn analysis. So the win-loss analysis that is being provided is now matured past just the sales and product teams to understand,
Yeah.
What buyers like or don't like, to how is the market perceiving the overall experience that we are now able to give our customers. And the ability to get at those loss interviews, as hard as it is, those are actually the most impactful for us to then do something with. So before we could talk to all of the customers that loved us, right? And they would always tell us all of these great things. You can't really change that. You can amplify it through customer stories and customer advocacy. But when you can get to the loss information and you know why you're losing for specific things, that is actionable for the organization. So it is just, I guess, change the way that we strategically plan across many of the different portions of our organization.
Love that. Scott, do you notice? I mean, I imagine you onboarding lots of clients, you kind of see this maturity curve. Is that something you see pretty frequently, pretty often, kind of throughout your clients?
Sure. I mean, it's actually funny just because when we started the conversation, I'm thinking about like clients that are in your situation that are starting and they have to go like kind of get some buy-in. We have to figure out how do we get sales on board. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum where you are right now, where I love knowing that every single interview that is conducted, that alert is going to go to a very broad audience. That those product and sales and marketing leaders, all of them are going to get that and they're going to consume that. And I also know that we have that kind of, big 6-month question. Like at the top, we're always trying to figure out why did we win and lose this deal? But then we also might have that secondary question of post acquisition, how are we being seen right now? Or what's this other like strategic initiative that we have? I love knowing that when I come back at the end of the 6 months and we do that kind of aggregate report, your audience has already consumed each individual one. So when I give my perspective of, okay, outside, when I'm trying to see the forest, this is what it looked like. It's just a really productive conversation that there's a lot of head nodding and kind of some ahas and some,
Yeah.
this is what this team has already done with that feedback. And here's how we think we could double down on it in the future too.
Yeah. I I I wanna, I wanna try and give the people tuning in a specific experience, because I know you guys probably have had several. Um, but can you think of Deanna, can you think of any specific example where you've had this mature win-loss program, you're able to kind of identify something, and walk us through how you identified that, and then what steps you took to change that, and just kind of what that process looked like?
Yeah, one of the more recent ones and very tangible ones was the decision driver around integration. So we found through some of our interviews, especially of the loss, that we were losing because of integration. And some of these integrations we even had, but we weren't doing a great job of letting our buyers know or to try them out. And then overall, some of them we didn't. So we looked at that data that we had in 2020 and in 2021 we revamped our strategy. So as we went into our 2021 planning with the CEO at that level of the organization, to then decide that we are going to make integrations a key part of how we win. And we put additional resources behind the marketing and positioning of our current integrations and also a small team, but to create new integration points. And we changed our packaging to make sure that integrations were a key part of the conversation. All of those things that we did throughout 2021 with those buyers. And as we then did interviews of win-loss analysis in 2022, we are now winning because of integrations. So we are able to take a clear why we lose and now turn it into a differentiator to why we win. So I guess that is a very
Yeah.
tangible piece of information that we gathered that went all the way up to the CEO level and allowed us to garner resources and change multiple areas of our organization to rally behind
Yeah.
making this a big impact.
I can remember really clearly that you took all these changes, like this started happening in 2021 and then July of 2022. Every single win that I talked to, I could name the specific integration that they were using, that they were applying. On the loss side, though, most of them just didn't have an integration need. They couldn't identify a need, and it was just kind of validating to say, "Oh yeah, if we can just connect the buyer to that as an important goal, we can dramatically impact our likelihood of winning this deal."
Yeah, one thing I love about win-loss in general is the fact that it basically provides every department to be more data driven when it comes to your roadmap or your churn reduction or increasing pipeline or your product roadmap strategy or messaging. So much of that tends to be a lot of assumptions and guessworks and squeaky wheels and an executive's vision, and sometimes that stuff can land, but oftentimes you're kind of shooting in the dark a little bit. But yeah, I love in this specific example, you probably, I imagine your team probably had lots of different directions you could have gone, but you said, hey, this is like we're getting clear data here that we're losing. You can quantify, see exactly how much you're losing by, and then you get to make those changes and see the direct fruits of that change, which again is another thing where you might make a change and you think, well, did that impact us? We don't know. Like, could that just be the market changing? Whereas with win loss, you're able to validate and say, yeah, that was a good change. That was meaningful. So I'm a big fan of that in
Yeah.
the space.
Yeah. I would also say that data-driven decision making, being able, the analysis of what you provided, Scott, and what we have with Clozd has been able to change the conversation. So it's one thing to go out and to do all of these interviews, right? We can do that. We can all pull our own nuggets from actually reading through them, and we read through them, throughout the year. But then being able to have that clear analysis of those key decision drivers as to why we win or lose, we get to come back to that and we get to convey that easily across the organization. Those visualizations to say, these are the themes that we should capitalize on, and these are the themes we have to improve. There's just no denying that data. So it's the analysis, though, that is really powerful, rather it being just somebody's notes, right? Like, oh, I think that I pulled these 5 things from these interviews and I pulled these 10 trends or these 6 things, rather than here is the
Right.
clear visual of these decision drivers. And that allowed the whole organization to rally around it, that just clear visualization.
Yeah, I'm gonna play a dangerous game and risk a new metaphor, but it sort of feels like when we talk about that conversation of moving from reactionary to strategic, that it's just an organization of musicians that everyone is kind of heads down looking at their sheet music, trying to beat that drum of I need to sell harder or I need to innovate on my product. And then you kind of looked up and you stepped into like the composer role where you started looking at all the different parts of the org and
Right.
using win loss to kind of be that stick that you can now be a conductor and you're having everybody kind of work a little bit better in symphony to know where you might need to put a little bit more emphasis and where you might need to soften a little bit so everyone can be more kind of unified and coordinated.
Yeah. And I would say, like, kind of as we wrap up here, obviously we're talking about that transition from reactionary to being strategic, right? Especially as it relates to sales. You've touched on a number of things. Is there any key takeaway that you would say, like, when it comes to using win loss analysis to enable sales, like this is kind of this is the way you see it, or one thing that you would kind of impart to those watching?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that um, the key thing to impart on win-loss analysis and where we can go to, it kind of also goes to maybe, Scott, your analogy of a composer, is that as a product team, our job is to find product market fit. If we can find product market fit, the job of sales should be easy, right? If we're doing our job, if we have the right features, we have the right audience, and we're doing that, and we've now composed this great, this piece that everyone has a different portion to play in, it should make the sales role easier for you to close deals. So I guess my parting advice is to see win-loss analysis as a way to find product market fit to then close more deals and have confidence into what we're doing, rather it being a reactionary, how might we change just one incremental thing, whether that is an individual person or a feature or, one messaging. Is like, what is that larger impact we can make so that we overall can give more value to our customers as we're winning in the market?
Love that.
Now, I know you're the host. Don't you dare ask me to follow up on that because there's no topping
Yeah,
that as being just the right
that's
answer.
the right answer. Yeah, I love that. I love how you talk about product market fit being kind of this flywheel. Hey, I won't sully the answer because it was just succinct. Beautiful. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Deanna, it's been awesome. You provided some great insights. Um, for anybody, again, kind of starting their journey and dipping their toes in, definitely check out Clozd, CLOZD.com. We have lots of resources for getting started. We even will we'll give out a free interview to experience a little bit what it's like to have a Scott Varner reaching out and providing that interview for you. So you can kind of taste like, oh, this is the kind of insights I can get. Obviously, we'd love to chat more with anybody about that. Super grateful for both of you for being here.
Yeah, Deanna, thanks so much for the wisdom, for the guidance, for lending some music
Yeah,
today for us.
love
There
it.
you go. Thank you for having me.